Hello, everybody. I'm Nitika Chopra, your host of Thriving Together, and I am so excited and honored to have this conversation with our guest today. I am sitting down with the amazing Pragathi Guruprasad, and I'm so thrilled to be talking to Pragathi. We talk a lot about divinity, about rituals, and about beauty, and also a little bit about how we met and how special that encounter was, I think, for both of us. So, I'm really thrilled to be sharing this conversation with you. I want to let you know a little bit about Pragathi before we jump in. So, Pragathi is the co founder of a company called Soma Ayurvedic, which is a luxury beauty brand that highlights goodness from the Indian forest. Pragathi has spent the last decade in the entertainment industry, both in India and the US, lending her voice to over a dozen Indian films, releasing independent albums, touring worldwide, and appearing in numerous films and TV shows in Hollywood, even like Never Have I Ever, which you might remember, you might recognize if you've seen that whole series like I have. Pragathi is one of the first South Asian faces of brands like L'Oreal, NYX, Cosmetics, ColourPop, Elf, Too Faced, just to name a few. She has amassed a dedicated following of over 1 million across socials, and Pragathi also runs an NGO and which is called And Alt organization that helps provide sustainable livelihoods for those in rural India with multiple disabilities. Most recently, Pragathi's Super Bowl commercial received 2 Emmy nominations. Pragathi is also a graduate of UCLA and she's based out in LA. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. I feel like it's the perfect thing to listen to with a nice cup of chai, which we talk about in the interview, or while you're going on a nice walk. And my intention with these conversations is that you feel seen, that you feel supported, and that you know that you're not alone with whatever it is you might be going through. And that doesn't always have to be, the biggest struggle of our lives. Sometimes we can just feel a little lost. Sometimes we can feel like we want more from life or we're not fully aligned with the things that we want. And other times it can be something a little bit more devastating and bringing us to our knees. So these conversations are meant to support you through all of that and remind you what thriving looks like, not just for me, but for you. I hope that you listen to these conversations that I'm having during the podcast and this one with Pragathi and understand that thriving can look quiet, it can look very personal, and it's really meant to connect you back to yourself and it's not about anyone else. So I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. And without further ado, here is Pragathi Guruprasad. All right, everybody. This is an interview that I have been so excited and just like anticipating for a while now. I have the incredible Pragathi Guruprasad with me, and I am so excited that we get to spend the next little bit together. Thank you for being here.
I am so excited to be here, Nitika. The day that I met you and sat next to you at that dinner, I was like, thank God I got seated next to the best person here. We had such a great conversation. You were so lovely and full of life, so I'm very excited for this conversation.
Gosh, Pragathi, that was going to be my line.
Aw.
I swear, that was going to be what I was going to say because, some insider tea for everybody listening. Sometimes you go to these dinners and they're filled with lots of different types of people, lots of different personalities, all that kind of stuff. And to be honest, personally, I tend to have a little bit of a hard time in places like that because I really just want to connect with real people and not be on the surface.
Yes.
And I sat next to Pragathi and I was like, first of all, I was clearly living under a rock because I was one of the few people in the world who had never met you or heard of your work, which over, millions of people have. She has millions of people following her on social media who's watched her work all over the world. She's been in campaigns, some of the most popular shows you've ever heard of, all of those things. So I don't know how I missed the memo about all of the incredible work that you're doing. But I hadn't heard of you at the time. And I was like, who is this angel that I am sitting next to? She is stunning from the inside out. Like, I have said 4 words to this woman and I want to be her friend. And I just want to know everything about her. And then all of a sudden, I go to your Instagram as I do after I, meet people. And it's kind of like our business card these days. And I see some of the most incredible work that you have done. I see that hundreds of thousands of people are captivated by you on a daily basis. And I am just like, oh my God, how was this humble, sweet, kind person who doesn't seem to be driven by ego sitting
Oh,
next to me and having also this massive, beautiful career that is also doing good in the world? So I had to start with that, Pragati, because when I met you, I was truly in awe, and I still am. And I really am so proud to be having this conversation with you, because I think someone like you is such an important example of how to grow, how to be in a media world, how to create content and put things out there, but also do it in a way where it doesn't at least come across to me, and I'm sure the other people who follow you, like it's driven by ego. So can we start there? Like, I know that's kind of a
absolutely.
big place to start, but
Of course.
do you resonate with what I'm saying? Have you practiced not having it be driven by ego? What comes up for you when I say that?
Absolutely. I think I say this as one of the biggest pros of my career and cons is that I started out really young. I was in front of the camera on stage in front of millions of people when I was 14. And so I think that's a very different space to start your career. And interestingly enough, it was around the same time that Instagram and social media was having its big moment. And so I grew a following and an audience online before I even knew what that was. And I think not only do I feel like I've had a lot more time with it than most people to, you know, see the black and white and just see what content resonates, doesn't resonate, what you can do, the good that you can do with an audience like that for just a longer time than other people have. And, talking about the positives of it, I think that's just what's been most helpful because there were phases in my career when I was just putting stuff out there that, very much could have been driven by the wrong reasons. And it took me so long to see that, oh, you know what, someone else is doing this. I don't want to be in that space, or that's not the energy that I want to put out into the world. And it's taken a long time to come to this side of things. And so I think, that's kind of where it comes from. And hopefully now, I think the person that you are is kind of what shows up online in many ways. Um, Although sometimes it is, not necessarily the life that you're leading, but I think there is a certain amount of energy that shines across when you put something out there. And I hope that, you know, mine is a positive, you know, effort into the world more than anything else.
Yeah. And, I also want to understand being, South Asian, and a big part of my journey has been connecting with God, connecting with spirit, connecting with something much greater than myself. And so much of what I see in you reminds me of God, reminds me of that spiritual practice. I'm getting emotional.
Yes.
I know this is
Oh
like the
my
first time
gosh.
we really talked, but it's true. I really, really mean that. And I want to know, is there an aspect of your life that has had you connect with something greater than you? And what is that like for you?
Absolutely. I would consider myself very spiritual. And I grew up, in a pretty religious family. And I think, as my parents were immigrants, and as immigrants, you want your children, you almost try a little harder to make sure that your children grow up with the values and the traditions that you had. So we grew up very spiritual and also very religious. And so that was in me from a very young age. And I think spending my early years and starting my career out in India, the spirituality is around you. Whether you want it or not, you set foot into the street and you hear the temple bell, and that's just what life is. And I think that combined with growing up and deciding, do I want to be more spiritual? Do I want to be more religious? Do I not want to be any of those things? And making those decisions as an adult, while also, embarking on a more non-traditional career path, I think kind of steers you in one direction. And I am such a believer of the universe. I am such a believer of energies and connections and that connection to God and that belief in God, whoever that God may be. And truth be told, I think that it's really hard to be present and sustain yourself if you don't have that belief that you're holding on to, you know? Every day is different and every day is harder than the last, but when you wake up and you're just like, it's going to take care of me, that belief, I think, is kind of what gets you through the roughest moments, because I'm sure you know this, we don't work traditional jobs, we don't have a traditional lifestyle, and the lows are real low and the highs are real high, especially when, you know, hundreds of thousands of people are watching. And so I think that has what has kept me afloat all of these years.
I I just resonate with that so much. And one of the things that's coming up for me as you share all of that is I'm thinking about the person who might be listening to our conversation, right? And I'm thinking about I talk to a lot of people who are living with chronic illnesses. I've been very vocal about my chronic illness journey. But there's people who are going through so many different types of things. And you mentioned like that spirit, that presence is there with you even on the darkest days. And so, in thinking about thriving together and learning how to thrive, a lot of times that makes people think of like the end result, you know, and like that visual of seeing you in some of those beautiful campaigns that you've been in or on stage singing with I literally heard you sing online and I was like, that was sitting next to me.
Oh,
It was just, I mean, if you could have seen the experience I was having when I was sort of uncovering and realizing all of the incredible talent that you possess in your just tiny frame, it just would
thank
have
you.
been a sight for sore eyes. But I do want to talk about that, right? Because a lot of times, especially even online, but otherwise too, we can see thriving as that end result.
Mm.
And so, with your relationship with spirit, with, you know, God and these religious and spiritual practices, what has it looked like for you when you aren't thriving, when you're going through those darker moments?
Absolutely. You know, I think there's a part of me that goes a little bit more silent, especially online when I am going through those things. And sometimes there's, you know, work obligations and you have to show up in the way that you have to show up. But I have found over time and as I've gotten a little bit older that being silent and connecting a little deeper with myself in whatever way that makes sense to me, and it's taken me a long time to figure it out, and I think I'm still figuring it out, is what does that mean to me, you know? And that could be something as simple as making it a ritual to go on a walk. That could be something as simple as, hey, I don't want to do as much high intensity movement. Let me, you know, connect a little deeper with my body and meditate more, do a little bit more yoga. That could mean, you know, distancing myself from certain people that I think are sucking up that energy or making me feel more down in the dumps than I have been before. And I think it's a combination of all of these things. There's no formula, you know, and I feel like a lot of people in those moments really find themselves. And to go back into that space of just like, I want to surrender myself and I just want to believe. And I think I was in India for about a month pretty recently. And I think so much of that journey was just going back to my roots and connecting with myself. And there were so many people like, oh, are you there for work? Oh, like, what's going on? What are you doing? And there's just such a pressure to make things productive, you know? And it was so interesting because I came back and I reflected on it and I was like, I wasn't comfortable telling everybody that I just needed time to be. And I just needed time to reconnect with myself. And I didn't really have a plan when I was there. And I think it's recognizing that and making those plans for yourself and reconnecting deeper with myself in whatever way that is to me has really helped me. Oh, and not to forget, keeping that village around you, you know, those key people that just lift you up in the best ways and give you that positive energy. And I saw a video recently that was like, I am so grateful for the female friendships in my life because without that, I don't know that I would be here. And that is, you know, one of the biggest reasons that I am here in the way that I am. And I think some of those things, as you recognize for yourself, there's no tips and tricks, you know, each person goes through it and they figure out what works for themselves. And I think that's kind of what it's been for me and will hopefully continue to be.
I think that's so beautiful. And also, it is so against what we are told. Like, to your point, right? And even in creating this podcast, right? There's like all this pressure to be like, oh, I need to have the sound bite that's going to get someone to want to listen. And then they're going to share it in this way. And then it's going to,
Mhm.
and the truth is, I just want to do this. I don't want to have to strategize and prioritize something outside of this connection. But it's true, we're not taught that that's enough. It's actually the opposite of what we're taught. So I really appreciate you sharing that story about you being in India and not really, having this like intense agenda, but just being there to be there. That is profound. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that, even if they're going through a challenging time and they're like, okay, I'm just sort of sitting with this right now. And one of the other things that I wanted to chat with you about is your incredible company that you co-founded, Soma Ayurvedic. And if you're watching the video, you can see me holding the Mysore sandalwood perfume oil. I always want to make sure I get it right in my hand. I have it on my desk now at all times. I'm throwing it in my bag all the time. This just won an Allure Beauty Award, which I'm so proud of. I'm like, yes, brown girls win.
Oh,
And I know you have a co-founder, and I'm putting it on. I'm putting it on right now. I can't help it. Anytime I open the
love that.
the bottle, I'm always like, oops, it's just, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And there's so much I could say about this product in particular, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is just your use of beauty as a healing tool. To me, that's what I see when I see so much of what you're doing with Soma Ayurvedic, but also just in the way you carry yourself through life, whether it's beauty through music or through beautiful things. How has beauty played a role in your journey towards thriving or in your everyday life?
Huge role, huge role. I mean, I think, like I was saying previously, it played a role before I knew it was playing a role, you know? And it it has been a part of me, everything from, when I was on TV when I was 14, 15, to people commenting on the way that I looked, the way that my skin was, the way that I was dressed. And there were so many moments of, even coming back to the US, going to high school here, going to college here, and just realizing that I buy all of this makeup and beauty, but nobody really looks like me in any of these campaigns. Like, am I able to use this? Is this for me? And then eventually ending up on those campaigns to then, joining this incredible business that is not only, you know, championing the gorgeous sense of South Asia and, bringing that into luxury fragrance because we belong there, but also just talking about and spreading knowledge about Ayurvedic practices. I think there's so much that has been such a close part of my life. And I think the excitement about beauty and the excitement about, that South Asian in the US and bringing that above and beyond has been just little, grabbing little bits from this journey. And I think that's what makes this company so special to me. And it's, of course, people love these scents and they love our products and all of these exciting things. And, you're the hustle of an entrepreneur and building a business and all of that exists. But I think at the end of the day, it really just comes down to if one more person who didn't know about Ayurveda before now knows, and if one more person realizes that the sandalwood in their fine luxury perfumes comes from Mysore, and that's where the finest of the sandalwood comes from, I think we've won.
Yeah, well, even as a South Asian woman myself who lights incense every day, like it is part of my daily practice, and I love sandalwood, this sandalwood smells like nothing I have ever smelled in my life. And
Yes.
I love that. I feel, and I am such a sensorial person, and I do believe our senses can just take us to a completely different world if we let them. And it's really, I think, a privilege to connect with the different senses that we have, because honestly, not everybody has access to all of them.
Yes.
And yeah, when I smell this perfume oil, I am immediately transported into a place that I've never been and also feels like home at the same time.
Oh, I love
It's
to hear
just
that.
such a gift.
Oh, I
So,
love that.
yeah. What does that bring up for you?
That's exactly, I was just thinking, I'm stealing that quote because that is exactly how I feel and how we want other people to feel as well. And it's so interesting you say that because South Asians and non-South Asians feel the same way. They're just like, there's something about this that feels like home. There's something about this that feels like me. And I think the uniqueness of it, of like, it smells so good, but I've never smelled anything like it before, is really what we're, hoping to do with every one of our products. And I have to send you the jasmine body oil because I feel like that's one of those that just like, there's so much jasmine on the market, but nothing smells like Indian jasmine. Nothing smells like mogra. And, you know, it just brings up so much. And it is such a personal experience, what you associate it with and what it brings up for you. And I think that's the most exciting thing about fragrance. And I'm so happy that you personally felt that and wanted to share.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was looking at all the different things that you have on your website, and as soon as I saw something with the word sandalwood in it, I was like, okay, give me anything that has sandalwood in it. So I would love to try your other products as well. I'm sure I'll have the same experience. And my intention in sharing about all of this with you is that I want people who are listening to know and to really understand that from where we come from, beauty is just not a trivial thing. It's actually a very divine spiritual practice. And I think that it has been co opted to be this other thing that I actually don't feel it is at all. So do you have a spiritual practice around beauty, or do you think of it that way, or what do you think of that?
I think it's more of a ritual to me than anything else. And I think that that in and of itself is spiritual in so many ways. Um, it's less about, this product has that and that product has this, and more about just the time with myself and the fact that I wake up every day and before I go to bed every night, there's a ritual that happens that's personal to me. And it's like what we were talking about before. It's a way that I connect to myself a little bit deeper. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about it. And I feel like that's sometimes missed with just this world of millions of products that we live in.
That is exactly it for me too. That is exactly it. I resonated with what you said before about how you were using the products, but you never saw yourself reflected in the campaigns, when you were younger. And I definitely felt that. But the other layer for me was I had psoriasis all over my body for most of my childhood, for like 17 years, starting at the age of 10. And I never saw anybody with psoriasis or with a chronic illness or anything reflected in these campaigns. And I also cut myself out of the conversation because I didn't really want to be with my body the way that it was.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I decided to start, seeing if I would like a fragrance, seeing if I could just put on a little bit of lipstick or, even a little bit of hand cream on the
Yeah.
spots that were a little less affected, maybe. And doing it for me. That's exactly,
Yes.
exactly it, right? So
Yes.
I think that's the theme that I really want people to understand throughout a lot of the things that we talk about. If someone was just maybe feeling intimidated still by creating rituals around beauty, where do you think that they should start?
I'm hesitant to say this for a couple different reasons, but I
Okay, tell
do
me.
think that online is such a resource for us these days, and depending on how you use it, of course, very easy to exploit. But I feel like Instagram and TikTok has now become a more inclusive place in so many ways. And maybe you could speak to this as well, where I'm sure you see people with chronic illnesses represented way more than before because they feel like they can be a part of the conversation and they feel like they can take a video of themselves and put it online, and there will be people that will join their tribe. And I think that if you approach it the right way and you have the right boundaries with it, it is such a lovely resource to find what works for you, find your people, find the creators, find the um celebrities or whoever it may be that you like online and how that resonates with you. And I think that's such a great starting point that has become so easily accessible to us.
Yeah, I do love that because I think the key with the online journey, and I've definitely had to explore this for myself too, is not having it become my identity, but having it be a resource, like you just said, right? So
Yes.
using it as a tool versus I think when things get really challenging, I know at least for myself, or when I start to over identify with, oh, I posted this thing and that means no one likes me if people didn't
Yes.
like it enough, or, that kind of a thing. So I do agree. I think creating that and using that as a resource, and I actually think TikTok is like so great for that. I feel like
Yeah.
it's so fun.
Absolutely. I've grown to love TikTok. I think that as times change and there's more platforms and things, Instagram has just become a place where I'm not chit-chatty very much, but on TikTok somehow there's this, freedom to just say whatever you want and post it. And once you kind of detach yourself from this many people saw it and this many people liked it and I have all these followers, you feel liberated. You just say what you want, and there's people that find help in that. There's people that find happiness in that. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And one of the things that I also have been admiring about you from afar, now you know the truth. I've just been fangirling you from afar this whole time since we met. But one of the things I've also really been excited to talk to you about is this nonprofit that you started that is all about, from what I understand, empowering those who are living with disabilities in rural spaces in India and in rural villages in India. And I saw that, and I have to be honest, I was like, "Oh my God, I want to do that." Like that is such a dream of mine as well, with the work that I'm doing here in the States or around the world with Chronicon, but wanting to take it to those underserved communities in our own country is just such a incredible thing. And I saw something you posted recently where you were sharing like one step at a time, you're learning as you go along. Like I know it's still a learning curve, but I would love to understand like what made you decide to do that and what made you decide to do it for this community, and just like tell me everything.
Absolutely. I consider myself so lucky. Like I was saying, I think my career started so early on, when I was a teenager, that the people that I've met, the kind of conversations that I've had access to, the way that I was brought up, all kind of, cultivates together and sometimes just puts you in the right place at the right time. And I have to give so much credit to my sister-in-law, Adabi, who started the organization. She's been in, education for those with disabilities forever, and she's been a special educator since the early 2000s. And the, you know, throughout my journey, I think one of the most important things that I've realized is that when you have a platform like this, there's a million things you can do. But the most important thing you can do is impact the way people think, the information that they're given. And there's so many people that want to help that don't know how to. And being that resource and being that voice is probably one of the most useful things that you can do with this platform. So I've done a lot of fundraising campaigns and I've raised a lot of money. Performed a lot of nonprofit concerts and things like that, but they were all one-off things. And it was just incredible to see the kind of impact that you have when you do things like that. And I think it was always my dream to have, my own organization, my own foundation. And my sister-in-law started this right around the time that the pandemic was starting. It's called Adult Organization, and you phrased it perfectly. It's about empowering and providing sustainable livelihoods to those with multiple disabilities in rural India. And what had happened was they started this organization with a little bit of funding. The pandemic hit, and it hit harder than ever in those rural areas that the families that they were hoping to support weren't able to go to work. Already the work that they found was obviously not happening, and they weren't eating meals every day. They didn't even have, the money. And it's so tight that they're really making ends meet. You go to work for a day and you make money to eat for a week. And if you're not going to work, you're not eating. And it just came to a point where it was the need for money and food was so dire that I was just looking, and I was talking to my sister-in-law and I was like, what is going on? What do you mean that they're not eating? We're complaining sitting out here about, oh, we have to stay at home. We can't go out and enjoy our lives. And there's people that can't put food on the table. And I think that's when kind of inspiration struck. And I was like, what if I'm just sitting at home, people donate, and there's a fixed amount of you being able to support a family for a certain period of time. And it was kind of a cameo type moment where I would send them a song that they liked, or they could dedicate a song to someone or a wish to someone, whatever it may be. And the most surprising thing about it was that if someone donated 13 US dollars, they would support a family for a whole month. A whole month. And
Oh my gosh.
it was just this incredible realization. And we raised about $30,000. And I think what was more special than, the dollar amount is that there's still people, donors, that are connected to the families that they helped, that are still helping them out, whether it's food, whether it's medical expenses, whether they want to send their kids to school or college and tuition fees and all sorts of different things. So we've set up basically donors for life. And at that time, it was crazy because I had just graduated from college. I decided that I was going to be in entertainment full time, and the world shuts down. And you're like, what did you do? Why did you make this decision? So I didn't have anything to do. I would literally just sit here in front of my laptop, typing up emails and responding to donors, making these videos and just connecting people. It's what I did day in and day out. And you see the impact that you make. And I was like, it had just given me so much purpose at a time where I felt like my life was falling apart. And I think that's when I really realized that, okay, there's a huge community here and there's a lot that can be done. And I think since then, we've connected so many different people, raised money for so many different causes, and we continue to. And I think at the end of the day, our aim is to set up skill centers in a lot of these different rural areas in India and train some of the able-bodied people to train some of the people with disabilities on how to create things, whether they're sewing, whether they're doing embroidery, whether they're dyeing fabric. Now we just set up a little camp to weave bags, and I posted one of those bags in a random picture and I got hundreds of DMs being like, I want that bag. Where'd you get that bag? And I was like, you know what? Someone with disabilities actually made this bag with their hands. It is handmade and it is stunning and it is so fashionable. I was like, you know what? I'm bringing 10 of these back and I'm selling them, and we're sending all of this money back to them so that they can continue their craft and they can feel inspired and say that, hey, someone actually really likes the things that I'm making. So it's baby steps. We're not a massive organization just, with hundreds and thousands of donors, but I think to see those moments of people's lives really changing in front of you, I think that's really where it's at.
And the thing I love so much about what you just shared is I've been thinking a lot about nonprofit work, and for a while I was hesitant to start anything in the nonprofit world. Even, Chronicon has always been an LLC, and I always felt like there was this, I guess, way that some nonprofits operated where it felt almost like the person who you were helping was you were helping them as in a place of authority, or like they're in a deficit, or it was just this dynamic that I didn't love. But what I've learned through reading different books, and I've been listening to this woman, Aijan Poo, who's the founder of CareFest, and she talks a lot about how nonprofits are actually a bridge for what should already be happening. They're no more and nothing less, right? And there's such dignity in what you are talking about and in creating this beautiful bag, which I want one, by the way. I want to buy
Yes,
one.
of course.
I can support, and because I remember seeing that and I feel like I saw it and then I was doing 100 other things, but I was like, oh, I have to bookmark that for something I want to get later. And there's such dignity in that, right? And that I think it needs to be the way that nonprofits are led. And it's not about, oh, look at this, quote unquote poor individual who's in these dire circumstances. It's honestly like, listen, girlfriend, any of us can be in dire circumstances at any moment. So while you're okay, let's see how we can help other people who just didn't have the same bridge that you did.
Absolutely.
So I really, really love that. And I can't wait to see what happens with the nonprofit. Do you guys have big plans, or are you just living in the moment? Like, what's coming next for you?
Absolutely. I think, for us, our biggest goal when we started the organization was to provide sustainable livelihoods. And the way that we're able to do that is by setting up these centers and training these people to come to a 9 to 5 job and pay them a salary. And I think we have set that up in a couple of villages, and we still have about 15 or so to go. And so I think when all 15 of those are up and running and we're able to, operate in a way where these people are able to come in Monday through Friday and get paid a monthly salary, I think that's when, phase one of our big plans will really be complete. And in the meantime, I think operating at such a small level and being so close to the people that are actually living there, there's a lot of different things that come up, and the reason that it's taking so long is because there's so many one-off expenses and emergencies that happen in situations like this. And so we obviously want to have the means to take care of a lot of those things, whether they're medical expenses, whether they're problems with the village that they're living in, or, the community toilet for thousands of people is not working, or all of those things somehow, thankfully they have somebody to reach out to and they come back to us. So a lot of the money that we're fundraising day to day ends up going towards a lot of those things, which are definitely making a difference, which is slowing down our, project that we want to work on. But I think as long as people feel that there's someone taking care of them, and the, people with disabilities don't feel like they're being left out of the conversation, I think that's a win in our books.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I feel like even with Chronicon, I'm always like, oh, I want to, grow, and I want to expand, and I want to scale, and I want to do all this stuff. And then I'm just like, girl, just help the person that's like in the community right now, that's showing up for this one event, that's, it matters. It definitely matters. So when you think of thriving in your life now, I know we talked about it a little bit when things have been challenging, but are there things that you do every day that are sort of like non-negotiables for you when it comes to thriving? What does that look like for you?
It's interesting that you asked that. I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she was like, I love that you're so ritualistic. I love your little rituals, and I'm so inspired by them, and I wish I could be like that. And I was like, you know what? Yeah. It almost made me realize that those little things that I carry with me throughout my day, no matter where I am in the world. And I think one thing that immediately comes to mind is my chai in the mornings. As soon as I wake up, I make myself a cup of chai, and I just need to sit with no distractions and drink it. And if I have a workout at 6 o'clock, I will wake up at 5 o'clock to make sure I have that 45 minutes with myself. And I think it's that, and then my evening chai, which is at 5 o'clock. It's just those moments that it's easy to carry those things around with you. I travel a lot for work. I travel a lot personally as well. So it's something that you can take with you wherever you go. And it's one of those things that grounds me. I wake up and I'm in a frame of mind of just being one with myself. Similarly, I think spending time outdoors or movement are things that really help me and inspire me. And those are things that I don't like to compromise no matter where I am. Even if that's going on a walk, getting some sun, going on a hike, whatever that may look like in different parts of the world or in different situations. And I think those are things that I hold very, very close to my heart.
I love that because, anyone can access chai, essentially.
Yes.
And, if you don't have chai in your cupboard right now, you can make some spiced drink or something like that, or have a coffee or, whatever it might be for you. But I really love that. And I was thinking to myself, when I was thinking of you sitting there with your chai by yourself in the morning, I was like, first of all, I need to do that more, because I definitely find that I jump into life as soon as I get up, and I actually don't love that. So I work on that constantly, but I also sometimes feel like I could sit there forever.
Yeah. Oh, that's the dangerous part of it, because you're just like, what if we just canceled today?
What if we just cancel? I really feel like I could just sit there forever and but it really does help me when I take that time. The few days that, I find a week where I actually get to sit up and just look out. I'm looking out at a beautiful view or whatever. It just makes a huge, huge difference. And you find that it centers you for the rest of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for a lot of different people, that's, a meditation practice, which I'm trying to get more into. But I feel like that's my meditation, is just sitting with myself most of the time. No phone, no emails, no laptop, no nothing. Some days you have to jump into life just because that's that's life, but there are those special moments when you have nothing around you except you and your child.
I love that so much, Pragathi. And I think that's a beautiful place for us to close our conversation together. But I could have talked to you forever. I have so many more things that I want to talk to you about. So I'll have to come and meet you for a cup of chai at some point.
Please,
I would
please do.
really
I was
love.
just thinking that is we could talk to each other forever, and I think it's so special that we happen to sit next to each other and we happen to feel this energy between us because it doesn't happen often. So I really appreciate you following up with this conversation, and I hope there's many more.
I do too. Thanks for being here with us.
Of course.